This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Tansley from Essential Skills. I'm here with Claire Wiggill from PMG and Julian Roberts from Essential Skills. The webinar this afternoon will be focusing on the topic of onboarding with a click, how automation drives compliance and retention. So employee onboarding is a particularly relevant topic at the moment. The need to bring people on board and induct them into the company's systems and processes is a challenge that lots of businesses are facing. So Claire and Julian are going to give you some insight on that subject this afternoon. If during the course of the webinar you have any questions, then please just use the chat function in GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar to actually ask the questions, and if they're general questions, I will try and interrupt the presenters and pose them directly to them during the course of the presentation. If they are more specific or detailed answers that are going to be required, we will come back to you directly after the webinar with a response. So without further ado, I will hand over to Claire Wiggill from PMG to introduce herself and to take you through what we're going to talk about this afternoon.
Hello, this is Claire. Thank you. Hi, this is Claire Wiggill. I'm with PMG, and we are a software company. We have a platform, our digital business platform, which allows our customers to configure solutions or applications to solve business problems. We've got quite a bit of experience working with customers on employee onboarding. It's one of the most popular uses of our platform, so we'll be talking about that today. But overall, our product is used for any sort, really, of process automation, improvement of user experience, integrations with other systems, along with orchestration of processes. And we do all of that with a partnership approach. That's who we are. So I'll let Julian introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Claire, and great to speak to you again, and great to speak to everybody else who's joined us today. So thank you very much for spending time with us. My name is Julian Roberts. I work for a company called Essential Skills. We are a worldwide business, so we deliver into UK, Europe, Middle East, and also into USA, Canada, and Southern America. So we are an e-learning business. So we provide health and safety training courses. We also provide risk and governance training courses. But alongside that, we also provide a learning management system which manages all of the training for you, fully automates the procedure, integrates with other systems, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We also provide rapid authoring tools, so you can actually create your own courses and deploy them in the same way. And we also provide policy compliance. So if you have documents that you need to push out to large numbers of employees, need to have proof that those employees have opened, read, understood those documents and actually signed off on them and passed a test to show that they've got proper understanding, we can also do that as well. Mentions on there, we've got outstanding support, that goes without question, and we've got 500 plus global customers, so we are a large international business. So hopefully we're going to talk to you today about something which is going to be of interest to you. We've a little bit of an agenda there for you, so you can see that nice infographic on there, which you can have access to afterwards if you wish to. So that's provided to you by PMG. We'll be covering some of the statistics that are shown within that infographic during our session today. So all in all, our session should last about half an hour today. We shouldn't keep you much longer than that. But what the infographic is telling us is that there are big inefficiencies and big risks of the traditional onboarding process. And we're also going to show you a little bit about them, some benefits and some case studies of actually trying to automate that whole process. So let's move on and let's look at some statistics. As I mentioned, all these are on the infographic for you. But onboarding is an inefficient process. HR is stretched thin. I'm saying that to you. I'm sure you're already aware of that fact. Through a survey that was actually done, we found that 19% of the people in the survey said that manual processes keep them from fixing bigger issues within the business. And also 30% of people said they spend between 15 and 29 hours every month rekeying data because they don't have an integrated HR suite. So if you think about 15 to 29 hours every month, that's almost a week of your month spent rekeying data because you haven't got an integrated HR suite. So imagine the amount of time, the amount of effort, the amount of cost that could be saved from fully integrating your proper onboarding process. So let's just think about onboarding for a second and why onboarding is an inefficient process. Well, if you've got a new starter, let's say we've got a new starter starting today. So our new starter enters the business. And on their first morning of the business, Well, there's a delay in the training that actually they're going to be completing. There's also a delay in some documents that we need them to sign off, which means they actually can't really get on with the task in hand. They really can't get on with the job that they've been employed to do. So right from day one, that employee feels a little bit on the back foot and doesn't really feel cared for as a new employee. Now, if that continues, if it's perhaps we're waiting a couple of weeks to onboard this person, perhaps we're waiting to get a group of people together to start the onboarding process, well, that starts to lead then to employee dissatisfaction. So over time, those employees are just going to feel less and less loved within the business. They're not going to really feel like they're being looked after by the business. They're not going to feel like a part of the business and fully integrated into it. So as that employee dissatisfaction rises, that obviously then drives turnover of staff, because those employees are going to think, well, I'm going to go somewhere to a business that actually is going to look after me, a business that's going to be appreciative of me joining there. And then that leads on to a further problem, which is the lack of a structured offboarding process, which creates additional risk. Well, you might think, well, what additional risk could that really create? Well, quite a lot, actually, and we're going to move on to that in a little later in the presentation in the second half there. So that's the basic thing at the moment. Traditional onboarding is inefficient, it's a poor process, and it leads to a very high level of dissatisfaction amongst your employees. Now, there are also compliance risks as well. So what do we mean by compliance risks? Well, again, in a survey that was completed, 49% of businesses said they failed to provide an overview of company processes and policies. Now, I'm going to revisit these numbers in a second and talk about why this is important. 40% of businesses rate their compliance or ethics program as basic. Well, basic's probably not really where we want to be aiming for. And 23% said they give no compliance training at all. So again, if you think about the way that this should work when a new employee starts with the business, or even for existing employees, if you're failing to provide an overview, first of all, of your company processes, policies, procedures. Now, a lot of companies that we speak to have actually gone through the process. They've done all the hard work and actually produced the policies and the procedures. But what they then do is store them away, so they're never actually seen by anybody. So what's the point in having them in the first place? So if 49% of businesses are failing to actually provide access to these to their employees, which they should be doing from day one, then what's the point in having them in the first place? And it's not a difficult thing to do. And again, we're going to come on to that about how simple these processes really can be. And again, if you're only doing a basic program for compliance and ethics program, again, is that enough? Are you really pushing the boat out as far as you need to go? Are you really showing to your employees that you care about them in the workplace, that you're going to make sure that they're safe and secure, but also that your business is protected by providing the correct compliance and ethics program, which is going to cover all angles for you? And then finally, 23%, which is an astonishing statistic, which give no compliance training whatsoever. So again, if you imagine a company within that arena, if something goes wrong, if there is a compliance issue, if there is a data breach, if there is anything that goes wrong, then what have you got in the background to then prove what was done, who it was done by, and when they did it? Well, nothing, because you haven't actually provided anything. So not only are you putting the employees at risk, but you're putting the business at risk as well. So it really is a very, very risky policy to sit back and say, well, actually, we don't really need to do that.
Julian, sorry, it's Tim here. I've got a question from an audience member here. So just going back to the slide that you're on there, when you're talking about compliance training, what sort of topics are you talking about? What are the sort of things that you'd include in a compliance program?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is, in some ways, it depends on your business. So it really depends on what you're doing and what you need to train your staff on. But in the basics of it, what we sell an awful lot of is the data protection side of things. Also, we sell a lot on the security side, so phishing, cyber security, cyber awareness. Also, simple things like social media awareness. So other people are aware of what they can and can't do on social media. Again, this is something that's so important to do from day one, so that somebody isn't posting things which are either inappropriate or pieces of information your business doesn't want shared on the internet, on a social platform that's very difficult to remove it again afterwards. So we try and provide training courses which enable businesses to ensure that their employees have got a full understanding of where the line is. Where is that line drawn? To make sure they're safe on the internet, to make sure they're safe using your data, that they're not accessing incorrect data, they're not sharing data they shouldn't be doing. And it's all around risk governance and also safety and health as well. So are you providing the right safety courses, which helps you, again, if you need to provide safety training to show compliance, are you providing that as well? And we enclose all that within a system which then deploys this by job role. So as a new employee starts with the business, we can identify the job role they're in and then automatically apply the phishing course, the cybersecurity course, the data protection course, whatever it might be that's applicable to their job role. So it's making sure the correct training is given to the right people based on their job role, but from day one. Make sure it's automated, make sure it's fully integrated in. So thank you, that was a brilliant question. I hope that has answered some of that for you. Productivity gaps. So by not having a proper onboarding process, by not having a single click onboarding process, you are then building in productivity gaps into that process. So first of all, you've got provisioning delays. So again, what do we mean by that? Well, it's just simple things like, so is the laptop available day one? Have they got access keys day one? Are all the things that they should have day one available to that employee? Again, so they feel like they were expected to be starting that day. Delays in system access, delays in job training. If you have a delay in the system access or a delay in the job training, how can this employee actually start to do the work that you've employed them to do? Well, they can't really, because they don't have access to the systems that they need and they haven't been provided with the training to enable them to actually use them. So again, without all this in place and automated from day one, it's very difficult for that employee to really get going, start to feel a valued member of the employment force. And this obviously inhibits success because that employee is unable to actually do the job that they're employed to do. And again, if you're not being successful at something right from the start, again, it is going to drive frustration within those employees. And then that's obviously going to then increase staff turnover, which again is something we're going to try and avoid as much as we can. Crikey, I've been talking for a long time here. Claire, I'm going to pass over to you to give my voice a rest and everybody else a rest from me.
All right. Thank you, Julian. I want to talk a little bit more about what the poor employee experience challenge is. And there's some fairly alarming statistics about the amount of turnover that companies are experiencing right now. First-year employees are turning over at about a rate of 1/3. 34% of first-year employees leave. They don't last beyond a year. And the cost of that in the U.S. of voluntary turnover is over $500 billion. That cost equates to $15,000 per employee. So you can see it isn't just about productivity and happy employees and compliance. All of those things are absolutely critical, but this is real dollars as well to companies. The lack of structured onboarding, which can impact this employee experience, creates a real bottom line cost. Let's go to the next one to talk about what happens next. So when an employee leaves, then there's additional risks. So it comes back to that security question that lines up with compliance. Apparently, 44% of millennials, 30% of Gen Xers, and 16% of baby boomers still have access to applications from previous jobs. Those are huge numbers. And as the workforce, of course, increases down at the younger end with the millennial piece growing, you can see that a lot of these people are leaving companies and still having access. And this is a direct reflection of poor onboarding practices and offboarding practices. If you don't have structure around these things, then a lot of things fall through the cracks and people end up still having access to data and information even after they've left the company. If you can go to the next slide, this is where it gets even more troubling. 44% of employees say that under the right circumstances, they would consider copying confidential information when leaving a company. And that is a truly shocking statistic. And it doesn't mean that everybody's going to do it. But again, according to surveys, 44% say under the right circumstance, they would do this. That is a huge risk for companies. And so let's go to the next slide and let's sort of tee up.
I was just going to mention to you there, actually, Claire, whilst you were talking about that, it was just suddenly flicking through my mind that obviously in Europe, there's the new GDPR legislation that's coming, and obviously in California, there's new data protection legislation that's coming in there. I think it's been implemented 2020. And with all of that, data is key to it all. And the potential for litigation, for fines, for damage to reputation in the marketplace, because of the publicity that would happen from that data being passed around when it shouldn't be passed around is huge. The impact on a business is absolutely massive. So if you've, I mean, that's what amazed me about that percentage. So if you have got that percentage of people actually taking information and potentially data which they shouldn't be taking and passing that around elsewhere, the risk to a business is enormous.
True. And if you even just think about the volume of turnover, as we've been talking about, a third of employees leave in their first year. There's data about those employees that falls under GDPR. And if you don't have a structured offboarding process, how do you know that you're even handling that person's data properly? There's
Absolutely.
So there's many more implications to offboarding than people, I think, often think of. The issues there are pretty extreme.
Absolutely, and we've come across a few customers based in North America as well who've said, well, GDPR doesn't apply to us, that's European. But actually it does. If you have any data that is from a European Union member, then GDPR applies to you. So it is still something that needs to be borne in mind. And it's the amount of data all of us as businesses hold is huge these days, just because of the way business works. So it is something everybody really needs to be aware of.
Right, and new regulations passed in California are not too different from GDPR regulations, and I imagine we're going to see more of that in the U.S. as well.
I'm sure you're right.
More control over people's data. All right, so moving on, we've focused here on the challenges, the problems. What do we need to do about these things? And really, the key in what we're talking about today is how you can use automation to help solve some of these problems. And that's everything from kind of going through the life cycle of this, the inefficient manual tasks that a lot of employees are struggling with right now in the HR area, in the IT area, which is rekeying data into multiple disparate systems. Then ensuring that the new hires are getting required compliance training and timely job training so that they can be productive very quickly. Then we want a good employee experience to help reduce turnover. And then we want to protect the organization against data security risks. So the solution for all of that is automating a lot of these processes so that you can drive the efficiency, reduce administration, increase data security and integrity, and drive employee engagement. And also just have visibility and an audit trail around that, which an automation solution will do for you. So, Julian, back to you. You want to give us some more here on the solution around compliance?
My apologies, Claire. I had myself muted in the background there, so I was chatting away to myself and nobody else. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Yeah, automation does ensure compliance. What does that mean, though? So, well, again, it's access to the correct systems on day one. And this is all about starting on the right foot right from the start of an employee joining the business. So if you're giving them access to the correct systems from day one, again, they're going to feel more productive. Provide an audit trail around what's been done. Well, I'll just give a little bit of background around what I mean by that as well. So if you're providing perhaps training, and if you're also providing perhaps access to policies, documents, method statements, procedures, anything around a business process, and you're expecting people to sign off on this document and agree to it, and then adhere to the rules that are set within that, well, you need an audit trail behind all this. We need to be able to show, well, this person completed this training on this date, and this is why they did it, this is how they achieved in the test. The same with a document. So this person signed off on this document on this particular date. We actually placed a test around this document so we can ensure that they actually understood the document, didn't just sign it off. And again, a full audit trail that shows when all this was done. But also, that audit trail should include changes. So if your policies and procedures and documents are being amended and updated as time is going on, that your audit trail should also cover the fact that, well, actually this person did version 1, whereas this other person did version 1.1, and then have that document or that training or whatever it might be available again, so that again, if you need to use it to refer back to it as proof, you can do so. So you've always got this information there sat inside an audit trail. And again, that's something we concentrate on very closely as a business, is providing an end-to-end audit trail so that you have closed loop compliance on everything. So there are no gaps in the process. So if at any point something should happen where you need to rely on this information, it's there, it's available, you've got the correct version. So that's why an audit trail is just so important around this. And again, that can be fully automated. Again, can you provide compliance training by role? The same applies to documents, to policies, to procedures, to anything. So when you're bringing a person into the business and they're onboarding them day one, Can we look at automating this based on their role? So if they're doing a role in a manufacturing environment, is there certain pieces of training that they require, which automatically we can engage them with, which we can also automatically give them access to certain documents which are relevant to their role. Again, all this can be fully automated very, very simply in the background. And then monitor training centrally. So have a way that if you've got thousands, tens of thousands of employees, that you're able to then look at this as a whole. So look across the whole organization and then look at your levels of compliance across the whole business. And then if you need to, go down to the granular detail and actually look at each individual state, each individual department, however you want to structure that data. But have the ability to be able to centrally monitor all of this information and then move down into the granularity of it. And also, I mentioned it before, quickly update policies and procedures. So again, a lot of businesses we work with will have written a policy and perhaps they might have actually onboarded somebody with that policy as well, which is fantastic. So if they've onboarded them, got them to sign off on that policy, great. Well, that's a good step forward. However, 10 years in, 15 years in, if that employee's been there a long time, which version of the policy did they ever see? Did they only see that on day one? Have they never seen that policy again? Even 6 months down the line, it's very unlikely they're actually going to remember anything that was inside that document. So again, build in an automated procedure where new updates to policies are pushed out to employees, or where we have a regular re-enrollment back onto these policies and procedures. So perhaps every 12 months, every 18 months, every 2 years, automatically that employee is asked to reread that document, sign it off again. Let's make sure you still understand this document. Because if you're leaving people years without actually reading policies, then again, it's almost the same as not showing it to them at all, because they won't remember any of it. So we've got a little case study here as well, just of a business that we worked with. It's a company called Jacobs Engineering. You may have heard of them, you may not. But basically, what Jacobs Engineering were doing was trying to push out, it was safety training that they were trying to put out. They're an engineering business, so they're in a relatively high-risk environment. And the problem they were having was that the learning management system, where they were controlling that training at the moment, was only providing them with very, very low levels of compliance. Now that was, again, based on compliance subjects. These are areas that they need to be able to show for their contracts that they actually have this training in place, that the employees are compliant, and then provide a compliance list of employees. Now they had, I'm not going to give you the exact figure, but it was a very, very low compliance percentage, certainly lower than 20%. So that was a major issue for the business. We went in there as a business and said, well, we can significantly improve that figure for you, and we can do that through automation. So the way we did it is we connected our system to their existing HR system. So what they were very good at was, when a new employee starts with the business, was ensuring that employee gets paid and that employee is placed on the HR system. So we have all of their payment information, we have the national insurance number, all of the pieces of information we need. So because that database was regularly updated, we connected to that. So as soon as that employee started with the business, they got added to the HR system and then automatically fed down into our system. Our system then recognized that was a new starter, also recognized that that person had a certain job role, and based on that job role, they had a certain training requirement. So the system then automatically sends out an email to that employee saying, welcome to the business, day one. Welcome to the business. You're required to do some training. Here's a list of training courses you need to do. Please click and log in. It will then send them a series of reminder emails out to try and push them to make sure they've done this. Now, an employee is more likely to engage with training in the first week that they're there than at any other time. They want to impress in that first week. Everything you ask them to do, they will do it, they will complete it. So by jumping on this from day one, making sure that was pushed out in the first week to these people, we managed to get their compliance levels up. And the compliance levels are now over 90% within that business. And it's also now been rolled out globally, because it was so successful on the pilot to 4,000 people. We're now being rolled out globally to 30,000 people, and that's on its way to 60,000 people very shortly as well. So the advantages to them as a business, so firstly, they can now show much better compliance levels, which is important for the contracts that they were doing. They also had a massive improvement in costs that were going out. So as it was before, they were using a very expensive learning management system. They were also having to provide a lot of the training face-to-face because the e-learning system wasn't being efficient in providing it. So their costs were astronomical. So we cut their costs down by over they were a tenth what they were when they first started. So it was a significant reduction in the costs for them. And they've also got reduced administration time. That means that people are able to do the jobs that they're employed to do, not sit administering a separate system. And based on the success of this customer is now actually authoring their own courses to address specific wellbeing issues across the workforce as well. So they're using this as a very positive environment to push out all sorts of different training to their business. So it just shows what's possible with automation and how that can massively improve the way that employees engage with the software that you're using. Claire, I'm just going to pass over to you for this, but again, I've talked way too long there probably. So I'm just going to pass over to you a little bit about why automation drives employee satisfaction, if I can.
All right, perfect. And I'll just say that your last note on the Jacobs case study is perfect segue for this, because as they're beginning to author their own courses to address well-being issues, that's perfectly in line with the whole concept of employee satisfaction, employee engagement, employee experience that's so critical now. It's about ensuring that people are able to do their jobs to the best of the ability, that they have all the tools and training that they need, that they're prepared to do the job. If you can go to the next slide, Tim. Better employee experience. So here's just some of the benefits that having a more structured onboarding process, one driven by automation, can deliver. Roughly half employees say that they're more engaged if they have a strong onboarding process. 44% are more efficient at doing their jobs. 42% have higher productivity. 46% are more confident, and 45% have greater trust. It is so critical to engaging your employees and delivering that experience that's going to drive your retention to have this more structured onboarding
Claire,
process.
sorry. Hi, it's Tim. Sorry, I just got another question here. You may be about to go back over this, but can you just go back over what are the sort of basic elements that make up an onboarding solution? So just obviously Julian's talked a lot about sort of training and policies being one, and mentioned provisioning, but what else is there that companies and HR teams need to be aware of when they're sort of thinking about onboarding as a whole?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the elements of onboarding beyond compliance are obviously getting them an ID and access to computer systems. That's everything from a network logon ID to an email account, file access, provisioning them in the proper roles for their jobs so that they have access to the right systems. IT provisioning and services. So IT plays a big role, and a lot of times the handoff between HR and IT is not automated. So there's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in that process. But the IT pieces are related to getting someone a computer or some sort of a workstation, whatever it is that they require, any other kind of equipment, software applications, a phone perhaps. Obviously, on the HR side, people need to be input into payroll systems and enrolled in benefits. From a physical location, facilities and business services, they need a workspace, a workstation, a desk, perhaps a phone extension, maybe business cards. Security side, they might need a key card or a parking pass. And then there's aspects of communications and operations to make sure that they're really integrated into an organization. So have in notifying the rest of the company or the rest of a new hire's department of who the new employee is to welcome them. Adding that employee to regularly scheduled team meetings or company meetings to make sure that they're engaged from day one. As you can see, there's a lot of different pieces that go into bringing someone in and getting them fully integrated as quickly as possible. So that really is the crux of how it can so easily be inefficient, which it so often is, and why automation and being able to integrate systems and pass data back and forth can help ensure that all of these pieces are being done and that they're being done on a timely basis. I'd like to...
Thank you.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just saying, brilliant answer. That's fantastic. There's an awful lot to it there to think about, isn't there?
Definitely an awful lot. I want to talk a little bit about a case study from a customer that we have, Parsons. They went ahead and automated their onboarding process with us and then as a result improved their first day experience. Their situation was they have thousands of employees worldwide, and they were spending over 67,000 labor hours a year dedicated to onboarding new employees. They had a lot of manual systems and processes. They had emails that got lost in email threads. They had lots of phone calls back and forth, and really no visibility into the operational progress of getting a new hire onboarded and getting all of those pieces in place that I just went over. By using our software system and working with us to develop an onboarding solution, they were able to automate over 30 processes and eliminate a lot of that miscommunication that went on between the IT department, HR, and other departments. That included things such as, again, things I mentioned just previously: network access, workspace assignment, equipment provisioning. All of that now can be done with a few clicks. And the solution we delivered for them also integrated various systems that of course, most entities now have various enterprise-wide systems. So that could include, of course, Active Directory or something for ID and role management, probably a SharePoint system for document management, maybe a P2P procurement system, possibly an ERP system like an SAP. So we did integration with multiple systems there, and the result was a 56% reduction in the time needed to onboard a new employee. And by time, that's the resource time, the amount of human hours spent in order to get an employee onboarded. So they cut it by more than half. Now that has freed up the talent management team, the IT team, facilities teams to focus on more value-added tasks, the kinds of things that can actually drive the employee experience and engagement, as opposed to just getting the basic pieces in place. They can spend things on, as you mentioned in the Jacobs case study, employee well-being. Right, that when you free up the people from doing this not low value added like rekeying data, then they can focus on things that really improve the experience of the company and ultimately, what the company can deliver in its own business to its customers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree entirely. Yeah, it's great that you referenced back to that to Jacobs. And yeah, that's just through confidence of the system. It's through confidence of being able to push these things out successfully. And it's just great that they're expanding that out, kind of outside compliance areas and just taking it to softer areas where they just feel these will be of benefit to the employees, which is just brilliant.
Right. So let's move on to the onboarding. the offboarding. If you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk about the offboarding challenge again, and what do you do to solve that? I want to share an anecdote here from one of our
Claire,
customers.
Sorry. Yeah, you just got one more question here, if I can interrupt you again.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just going back to maybe to your case study there and things. What are some of the stumbling blocks that people don't see when they sort of begin this sort of onboarding initiative?
Right.
What are some of the unforeseen things that when people sort of start trying to connect stuff up might trip them up?
Honestly, I feel that this is it's pretty similar to people putting together any type of automation system or even a software implementation. I think one of the hardest things is getting people to really understand the requirements of the implementation, and part of that is just being able to define what their processes are. When there is no structured process, you're not really going to be able to get an answer from any one person as to what the process is. So being able to implement something in an iterative manner, to do sort of waves of implementation and tackle one piece at a time, as opposed to a complete replacement of the entire process, the way anything's done, just makes it that much easier and faster to get something implemented. So as with your, back again to referencing your case study where they started with a pilot, that's the kind of thing that we recommend to our customers as well. Pick something small, pick one aspect of it, whether it's the compliance and training, whether it's the provisioning of equipment or just provisioning of a network ID account. Start with one piece of it, get that in place, get people comfortable with that, and then start expanding from there. That's also going to help streamline the change management issues, which are just always a challenge with any kind of implementation in an organization. People people can have some challenges getting their head around changing any types of processes. So I really think for onboarding, just like really any software implementation, I would recommend looking for partners and looking for an approach that's going to allow you some sort of agile, iterative rollout. Running a pilot, starting with one piece of it first. I think that's going to help lead to success.
Okay, that's great. And then this is a slightly more specific one that's just coming in here. So we've got someone who's got the Workday system, an HCM system, and I said, well, can't we just use that for onboarding? Won't that just do what we need?
Yeah, well, it may do that, but in our experience, what we found is that any specific point solution, be it an HCM system, an ERP system, is probably going to have some gaps in functionality or processes that don't necessarily fit your organization. So just don't rule out the benefits of having a system that you could implement to bolster those pieces. So something that's specialized, like Essential Skills, that is just so expert at delivering the compliance and the e-learning, also, or something broad like us. And I know this is sounding a little like an advertisement, but this is just, these are the reasons that I know we get brought into customers, is to potentially fill in those gaps, maybe make integrations simpler with other systems. So it's very possible that systems that you all have can do these things. And if that's the case, that's fine. I think a lot of what we're going over here today applies no matter what. It's really just about the benefits of automation. But if you don't feel like any tools or systems you have can do this, then look into where you could augment what you have in place by bringing in something to fill in the pieces you don't.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So let's go back to offboarding. We're talking solutions here, and we talked about all the risks before. I want to add an anecdote quickly, just about a customer that we had, just to further highlight the risks of offboarding. So a customer of ours who was not using PMG for offboarding automation at the time, they have about 35,000 active employees. And when they had a particular employee leave the company, they didn't delete that employee's account, IT account. They just disabled it. So no changes were essentially made to the account's access rights. And sometime down the road, it wasn't that employee that then re-accessed that account for any kind of bad doings. A hacker had used a brute force attack to get this person's password, and then used that account to gain root access and invoke a virus throughout this customer's entire system. So IT was able to find it, shut it down, remove the user from that system, and clean up the servers. But 1 year later, the same account was hacked to get into the same system. And once again, you get admin access to the servers. So basically, the issue was they were not managing their accounts properly, and it was something they really hadn't realized until things went, pretty wrong. That without knowing that they've removed that account from all of the roles and all of the systems that they might have access to, and make sure that they've fully deleted the account, they remained vulnerable. So the risks here can be very real, and we even have a customer that experienced that. So moving on to the next slide, the solutions. The ideas of what you need to cover are really deprovisioning, as I said, system access, deprovisioning training access, ensuring that you have the correct documentation of that, and ensuring that you have an audit trail. In a nutshell, essentially what you're doing is you're working backwards from an onboarding process to deprovision all of the things that user has. And it can also impact things like cost. If that former employee still has a role or a subscription or a license seat to something that is being paid for, if you don't make sure that you've canceled that person's account, it could be something that the company is still paying for and no one's even really realizing that. So it's important to remember offboarding, even though it gets, I think, sometimes a lot less attention than the onboarding piece. So I think to sum up some of these benefits that we have of automation, essentially what it'll deliver for you is timely provisioning, timely employee training, greater security and compliance, a better employee experience, happier, engaged, more productive employees, so therefore reduced turnover, and more secure offboarding. And I think that essentially wraps it up. Yeah.
Talking about timely, that's perfect. Yeah, that's about 35 minutes I think we're on there. So yeah, it's perfect time to wrap up. So thank you ever so much, everybody who's joined us today. I hope you found something in there that's interesting. Hope you found this engaging. Hope you found some of the statistics interesting. Yeah, sorry, Tim, have you got another question in the background?
I've just got one last question in. So again, as a takeaway point, can you give some advice about where do I start? is basically the question with an onboarding initiative. What should my first steps be? Because we've covered quite a lot of ground over the last sort of 35 minutes. So if you're starting with a blank piece of paper and a bunch of systems that aren't connected or coherent, what's the first step to take to sort of almost decide whether it's feasible to make some serious improvements through automation?
Yeah, I can take this one, and then Julian, you can add in whatever you'd like when I finish my portion of the answer.
Okay.
I think the thing is to identify your greatest pain point and start there. So I talked a little bit about an agile approach or an iterative implementation. Pick one piece that you know is particularly bad in your process, not working well, or creating the greatest risks. Try and find that greatest pain point and just start with that one. I do recommend trying to streamline the process as you automate it as much as possible. Chances are, I mentioned that there probably isn't any one specific process that everyone follows, but try and identify when you're mapping out how you want to automate the process. What are there any steps that can be removed? So a perfect example would be, are there extraneous approvals that could be eliminated? Do you have scenarios within your current process where something is being approved in order to get someone, some sort of software or some kind of basic ID account, and essentially it is a rubber stamp, everybody gets approved? Do you really need to have that approval, or would a notification email suffice? So that's an example of how you can streamline that process. And I think building out an automation workflow, what you want to do is build it out for the 80% of the normal typical process, like what we refer to as the happy path. For exception or error handling, make sure that you have a route that'll take it out of the automation for that, but initially probably still handle those exceptions manually. It'll give you greater clarity into what additional automation you need to do for certain critical exception handling, and where it really happens so rarely that you don't necessarily need to automate that building and maintaining that process in an automation tool would be possibly more cumbersome than just in the handful of times something happens every year, just having someone take it offline and handle it and then move the process forward again in automation. So look to start with your greatest pain point, streamline the process, and don't try and have the automation workflow handle every single scenario. Choose the most likely, about 80% of what's normally going to happen, and start with leaving the exceptions handled the way they are and bringing it back into automation when they've been handled. You'll learn from that and be able to then adapt and update as you go. That's my recommendation.
And I would agree with you, Claire. I mean, just straight back to your point about finding your pain points and aiming at those first, it's exactly the same from our side as well. So again, quite often, if you're introducing an e-learning system or online training system or a policy compliance system, it might be the first time within your organization you have something like this. So find the things first which are going to create the biggest impact, are going to get a positive reaction from the workforce as well. So if you're introducing this well, so let's say you've got 5,000 employees, you want to actually cover all 5,000 employees, not just on board. So it's not just your new starters, you're actually trying to cover everybody. So what you need is a quick, big win. So do something very positive. Make sure employees, when they see this for the first time, think, do you know what, that was actually a good experience. I can see I've benefited out of that. And as an employee and as a person, I'm better for having done and gone through that process. So that there is a benefit there for the business, but also a benefit for the employees, so that ongoing, they're going to be more proactive about that process. They're going to engage with it. They're going to be positive about it. So find your pain points, try and get a very positive initial experience from it. Because if you start off with a negative experience from your employees, it's going to be hard work to build that back up again. So don't overstretch yourself. Pick something good, relevant, that's going to get a really big impact straight away and get that really positive feedback. So
yeah,
that kind of reiterates what you said, Claire.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, is there anything you wanted to add, Claire? Or are we good?
I think I'm good.
Brilliant. I'm good as well. Hopefully everybody else out there is good. Again, thank you very much for spending time with us today. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope there's been something there of interest to you. If you want to contact any of us, you both got our web addresses there. You've also got our email addresses there. Please feel free to email Claire or myself. I'll be very happy to have a conversation with you, or have an email conversation with you, or a telephone conversation with you. I'm sure either of us would. If you want some access to these slides or to the infographic we showed at the start, please just let us know and we'll happily provide you with access to that. So thanks again. Hope to see you on one of our webinars again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for your time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.